Okay, we're underway. I'm with Michael Canuel, who's been gracious enough to give us some time for this interview. Michael, to start out with, we're going to do a little bit of background information for context, which we do with every interviewee. So if you could tell me, please, where were your parents born?
My parents were both born in Rimouski, Quebec. My mother's family dates back to the 1660s, and my father's family dates back to the 1710s.
Wow.
So we're Québécois, pure laine, vieille souche. We're all go way back.
Okay. And where were you born?
My dad was in the Navy, and he was stationed at the time at Halifax. So in Halifax, and that's where I was born. So I was the Pepsi born in Anglo Nova Scotia.
Where did you receive your education? Elementary, secondary, and post-secondary?
Elementary was in Nova Scotia. Then, a part of it. Then they finished off elementary here in Quebec, then high school in Quebec, and then I did my high school here in Quebec, then a university in Canada and the United States.
Okay. And what is your occupation now and any past occupations that you've had?
Oh, phew. All right.
Yeah, that's a long list.
I'll go real quick. I started off as a high school teacher. Then I was a conseiller en développement industriel for the Ministère de l'Industrie et du Commerce du Québec. Then I went on and I was co-owner of a multi-plant manufacturing facility. Owned a number of other companies during that period of time. And then retired 17, 18 years ago, and stayed retired for less than a week and started up as CEO of Learn. And that's basically it. I mean, there are a few other things that I've had going, side hustles, if you want, along the way, but that's basically the story. And
where do you live now?
I live in beautiful Saint-Colomban, which is in the Lower Laurentians, just a little west of Saint-Jérôme.
Very good. And now getting more to the meat of the matter here. I'm going to start off by asking you, what is the best thing for you personally about living in Quebec?
Well, the best part of living in Quebec is that my family's here. My kids are all here, and my grandkids, all my relatives, so friends and family are here. I love the culture, the language. I love it all. So yeah, it's just I don't know if there's any one thing other than I would say my family first, and then just the fact that this is home.
Well, the next question might be a little difficult, given your comment about one thing. Describe your relationship to Quebec in a single word.
Yeah, one of those things. In a single word, good. We have a good relationship. I have no major issues or beefs with Quebec per se.
Okay. Where do you feel most at home in Quebec? For example, in communities based on language, culture, profession, or geographic location?
Obviously I feel most comfortable at home. I'm in Saint-Colomban, but I feel comfortable everywhere in the province. I don't feel uncomfortable anywhere at all. I mean, be it Montreal, Gatineau, Rimouski, I'm comfortable throughout the entire province. It's as I said, Quebec's my province, my home. So I'm comfortable here.
Okay. The next question's it's a little, some people have found this a little bit difficult, not the first part, the second part, because it talks about the official definition of Quebec. So a lot of people have asked me, well, who are you talking about? The official definition of Quebec in the context of this question can mean the government's definition, your peers' definition, what you perceive to be the official definition of Quebec. That's what I'm referring to, or what the question refers to, I should say. So I'm going to ask the full question now. How would you define a Quebecer? And do you think the so-called official definition in Quebec includes you?
I think Quebec is without question a distinct society. And it brings together people who share a lot of the same values and historical context. So right off the top, that's the first thing I would say. We share a great deal in common. I feel very much a part of that community, of that society. I'm not uncomfortable with it. That does not mean that I agree with all the government policies and laws. That's not the same thing. I really make that distinction between government legislation, bureaucracy, and the everyday Quebecois, because I don't find there's a great alignment between what the Quebecois want and say and think, and a lot of what the legislation is out there saying. A little bit like Bill 101 when they first came out. Most parents, Quebecois, Francophone, didn't realize that it actually limited their choices as to which school they would be able to send their children to. When they found out, many of them were disheartened by it. And so I feel comfortable with the Quebecois. I feel like I am a Quebecois, but because of the influence over my lifetime, I've been associated a great deal with the English community. So I'm comfortable in all of it, and I don't feel uncomfortable anywhere or with any real part of it, other than the legislature, which I find a little xenophobic.
Okay, fair enough. Has your sense of identity as a Quebecer or Quebecois changed over the years? And if so, in what ways?
Given my particular context, and again, just to set it up, when I was living as a child in Nova Scotia, we spoke French in the house, and with my brothers and my parents, we only spoke French in the house. The moment that we stepped outside, we only spoke English. So when I was in the English community there, I was the Pepsi frog for the Anglos. And then when I came to Quebec, because I had spent more time speaking English than French, I spoke French with a little bit of an accent. And as a result, I suddenly became bloke, tête carrée, and so on and so forth. So I've always felt maybe a little bit outside the normal stereotypes, but also I've developed a sensitivity for what it's like to be a little bit of an outsider, and come to appreciate the values and the differences of both the Anglophone English community of Quebec and the Francophone community. And as I said, I can work and live with both, but I recognize the values and the richness of both communities, and also the fears and the concerns of both communities.
Okay, well, carrying that thought forward brings us to the next question. What are some of the most difficult things you find personally about living in Quebec?
I think it's the quick rush to judgment on a lot of different things. I think we don't look sufficiently in depth at what's driving people to feel and think the way they do. I look at the French media very often and what they're saying about the Anglo community, and you go, that's really a very superficial response to it. But by the same token, I hear my West Island friends saying a lot of the same quick things, and talking about as if all of Quebec was Francophone Quebec was monolithic in their thinking, their approach to various things, and it's not. So we're always quick to judgment on a variety of things, and we need to spend a little more time doing it. So I like to look at these things and say, well, is there a real fear for people losing their language and their culture? Sure, there's a real fear. But then the flip side is, will we get ahead by suppressing another language or culture to preserve one? So I think there's these kind of issues need to be looked into in greater depth, rather than saying deny one or feeling immediately persecuted. Like, why do these people feel the way they feel, be they Anglophones or Francophones? So I think that's kind of like the typical middle of the road position that I'll take because of my background.
Well, that kind of leads me into the next question, which you've partially already answered, so I'll just ask it anyway. In recent years, Quebec's Francophone majority has identified a number of linguistic and cultural threats. Which of these concerns do you share and support? And which of these concerns make you feel excluded or targeted?
I don't think there's much doubt that the influence and impact of being a minority in an English-speaking continent is a little bit of a threat, and you see how the English language, the Canadian and non-Quebecois culture and influence stuff come to play in a variety of things, and these are the traditions that people want to hold on to. This is their language, and I really respect that. I think that there's a lot of reason for them to feel threatened by all this, because the threat is real. It's not imagined. It's not something that someone's dreamed up. It's real. That being said, the solutions that were coming about tend to pin the blame on another linguistic minority, which is probably the easiest thing to do politically. And that's what our politicians love to do. They love to find it's got to be someone to blame for this. Can't be us. Can't be the fact that we're maybe not doing a good enough job in our schools teaching French and encouraging it in a variety of different ways, and also maybe in our English schools working to make sure that our students don't come out that they come out rather really fluent in both languages. I think that's work. So it's again, work needs to be done on both sides and find a decent middle ground and a better understanding of one another's grievances and fears.
Well, these questions being so open, you often answer a question I'm about to ask before I've even asked it, but I'm trying to be thorough here, so I'm just going to go through the list. What is the biggest problem facing Quebec, and how could it be resolved?
I think the biggest problem is a general misunderstanding of one another. I think that's fundamentally the single biggest problem, a failure to understand and appreciate where everyone is coming from. When I hear see the French media, because I don't believe that a lot of the Quebecois that I speak to and I socialize with and see, they don't feel necessarily this way, but the French media loves to say that the English are the privileged minority, the most privileged ever, and you keep hearing that kind of nonsense going on. And so that kind of thing needs to be addressed. And as I said to you, the English community has to come back and say, well, listen, what is it we can do to really assure them that our interests really align with the interests of the majority. So I think that we need to, as I said before, take time to come to a better understanding, a deeper understanding of what our problems are, and also research some of the real responses. I don't believe that, and again, one comment I want to throw in there is that I have yet to see any research that says that by making a sign that's in French, and then the English portion has to be 50% the size of the French one, that has any influence or bearing on preserving language and culture. There are a lot of little things along those lines. There's no evidence. It's just gut responses. And I think that that's the whole point, is that very often the politicians need to go off the emotions. That's what drives people to vote and to feel a particular way. And when they're told the language and the culture are being threatened, and if we don't do this, you're going to lose everything, they say, yeah, okay, fine. So they'll do things that may appear draconian, but no evidence to support it. And as I said, from our English community, we have to understand that this culture of fear that's being promoted by politicians, I think, needs to be addressed. So maybe that's, as I said, the single biggest thing we need to really stop and take a look at this in a different way, in a different context. Okay,
great. Now the next question, it's kind of a visual trick. But it's a trick is a bad choice of words. It's a very effective visual tool, I guess what I'm going to say. Can you indicate to me on a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being weakest and 10 being strongest, indicate by a show of fingers how strongly do you feel that the joys of living in Quebec outweigh the challenges? Excellent. Very good.
I'd throw my toes up in there too, but that's, you don't want to you don't want to see that.
No, no, no.
Yeah, no,
And that would be very rude in Thailand if you showed me.
yes, it would.
your
Don't
feet.
touch me with your feet. That's right. That's right. Exactly.
Okay, is there anything else that you would like to say? You're free to say anything you'd like about your sense of identity or belonging in Quebec.
Part of my role as an educator is as much as possible to get people to stop, to reflect, and to think through things, as opposed to, as I was saying earlier, rush to judgment. You know, when you do your doctoral studies, one of the things you learn that's most important is opinions are easy and fast to come by, but when it's they're researched opinions, and you come onto something or after something after really having dug down deep and put aside your emotions and your preconceived thoughts, and you say, okay, fine, I've looked at the research, I've looked at what all this, I have a better understanding and appreciation for it. I think that that's something that I like to try to do with my own children, my grandchildren, so that before they get excited about one thing or another, say, listen, what does the research say? What's the evidence to support all this? Forget how you feel about all it. What's the real deal here? And that, to me, is something that we need to spend a lot of time doing, as opposed to just gut reactions and feelings. This is how I feel. You know, like, no, what's the evidence? Just show me the evidence. Show me the proof.
Right. Well, I want to thank you very much, Michael, for your comments and your answers today. They were very forthright and very elucidating, and I thank you very much.
Yes.
I'm going to